fighting for free speech, Western civilization, and delivering common sense for the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Scott Jennings.
Okay, it's Monday, January the 19th. It is a new week here at the Scott Jennings Show. We are live from Louisville, Kentucky today. Boy, it's cold here, by the way. It's like the frozen tundra of Louisville, Kentucky. I spent the weekend at the Jennings homestead out tending to chickens and also tending to the Jennings boys. It was good to be home despite the weather. And although we're going to talk politics and issues as we normally do today, I suppose we should note that everybody in America will have their televisions on tonight. It is the national championship football game, and it is the Indiana Hoosiers, number one in the country, 15-0, taking on the Miami Hurricanes, 13-2. Everybody loves this Indiana story. They love the Indiana story. The coach and the quarterback interplay is amazing, and we'll see what what a turnaround, by the way. Indiana was kind of a doormat football school, and now all of a sudden it's the greatest story in America. I was actually in Florida for several days over the last few weeks, and they're excited about Miami down there. In fact, at a speech to the Florida Realtors Association the other day, I did remind them that back in October, the Louisville Cardinals did defeat Miami. I told them it was nice that they had gotten their football program back on track. Maybe someday they could come up with a team that could beat Louisville. I'm just saying, for you Miami fans out there, don't hate me. I got a great friend at Miami, by the way. He's in charge of all the athletics. Rudy Fernandez. He's one of the greatest guys. I worked with him back during the Bush years. And, just a great dude, and is in charge of the athletics. So good luck to Rudy. Good luck to Miami. Good luck to Indiana. Congratulations to the people who generate revenue from airing college football, because you're going to make a bunch of money tonight. The Scott Jennings Show brought to you by Ease Total Health. Health insurance is broken. Ease fixes it with no deductibles, no restrictions on doctors or hospitals. It is a set of benefits you can use on day one. Visit easeforeveryone.com/Scott to learn more. Ease Total Health. My advice, look at it. If you're upset with your private insurance, and chances are you probably are, Ease might have the answers for you. Let's start with the news. Terror in Minneapolis. Rogue left-wing agitators on Sunday morning stormed a Baptist church during services. They disrupted worship. They scared children. They were harassing innocent families. You may have seen some of this video on your social media feed already. We're going to show it again here in just a moment. All of this happened while it was being taped and egged on by the likes of former CNN personality Don Lemon. And if you have followed my career at CNN, you know I used to appear frequently on the Don Lemon Show. I know Don Lemon, or at least I used to. So Don Lemon and a band of, well, they would say they're protesters. I would say they were terrorizing these families. You can call it what you want. Radicals go into a church. Let's play Cut 11. Here's footage from inside the church.
Renee good! Renee good! Renee good! Justice for Renee good! Justice for Renee good! Justice for Renee good! Hands up! Hands up! Hands up! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
This is in a church.
Don't shoot!
Literally inside of a church. What you're hearing are radical protesters inside of a church. You can see, if you're not following along on the video feed, you can see the pastor is in the pulpit. And you have these radical activists. Here's somebody with a phone right in the face of the pastor. The guy's literally up in the pulpit preaching. You see children crying. People are scared. This is going on in a church in Minneapolis. Absolutely brazen. And Don Lemon, former CNN anchor, was egging it on. He did not care that these innocent families were being terrorized by these agitators. Let's play Cut 8 and see what Don Lemon had to say about it all.
Watch this guy here. Look, he's hugging his kid, and I've imagined it's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here. But again, careful. It's very slippery right here. Yeah. It's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here. But that's what really careful, please. Really slippery. Not kidding. That's what protesting is about, and so.
That's what protesting is about. We're here to make you uncomfortable inside your church. Don Lemon told the church pastor, after cramming a camera in his face, that he had a First Amendment right to invade his church and to terrorize the people inside. I wonder what Don Lemon and his radical band of protesters were thinking when they saw the sobbing children. They were thinking to themselves, this is good? This is a good thing? Sounds like they were very pleased with themselves. The Trump administration is infuriated. Let's listen to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, friend of the show, Harmeet Dillon. She says Don Lemon was part of a conspiracy to break the law and storm the Minneapolis church. Here is cut 9.
Soundbite that we played that Don Lemon used the word we. Not protesters, not they, not them, or any of their preferred pronouns. He said we. Does that put him on the line as a protester and lose his First Amendment media coverage?
This position of his is so stupid. I was trying to figure out how to put it in layman's terms. Imagine you have a bank robbery that's being planned by a number of criminals. They're crossing state lines. They're using the wires. And then a podcaster says, well, let me embed myself in here and come along for the ride and live stream the crime. That would not be protected by the First Amendment. And so it is a crime to disrupt and harass and make people in a church or any house of worship feel unsafe in this country. And when you're part of that planning and show up and ride along and laugh outside about and make commentary outside about how disrupting and putting people in fear is literally part of protest and part of the plan, we are not reaching conclusions now. Of course, everybody is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But if I were giving advice to a journalist about this, which I have done in the past, I would say do not participate in a crime actively.
There are very real questions about whether Don Lemon and these protesters that invaded this church have violated a law called the FACE Act. And at 33 minutes past the hour today, I've invited the Viceroy himself, one of the smartest Republican lawyers I know in Washington, D.C., the pride of Iowa, Mike Davis. You've heard him on the show before, to come on and talk to us about the FACE Act. Did Don Lemon and these radical protesters violate this law? A lot of people are saying that they did. And as I mentioned, and as you can hear from Harmeet Dillon there, the Trump administration is none too pleased about all this. Now, by the way, this is not the only thing going on in Minneapolis. There's also other video from the weekend. You've got protesters shooting fireworks at law enforcement. All kinds of chaos and mayhem. Walz's warriors are out on the streets. Why, by the way, are they out on the streets? Tim Walz told them that they are at war and they should pretend that they are at Gettysburg. That is what Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, has instructed these people to believe. So it's no wonder there is chaos and mayhem. We're going to cover this more at 33 minutes past the hour with Mike Davis. You're listening to Common Sense for the American People. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. I want to talk to you about our friends at Child Help. Far too often, we're seeing this happening more and more, online grooming. You already know Child Help operates the National Child Abuse Hotline. They also have vital tools for families and children to stop online grooming. It happens in these chat rooms, in these gaming centers. You have to be prepared for this. For $27, you can save a child from abuse through the National Child Abuse Hotline and through the tools they have to stop online grooming. Here's how to do it. Text the word Child Help to 94878. $27 is all it takes. Or go to childhelp.org/Scott. I donate. I encourage you to do the same. When we come back, some wild times on CNN last night. We'll play the clip. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Hey, it's Scott. I want to talk to you about our friends at Balance of Nature. You can find them, by the way, at balanceofnature.com. They have this thing called the Balance of Nature Whole Health System. These supplements are perfect for a resolution in the new year. It's kind of tough to stick with New Year's resolutions, and that's why Balance of Nature's Whole Health System supplements are one of the easiest ways to do it. They're very versatile. You do 2 scoops of fiber and spice and mix it easily into drinks, and it adds a warm, aromatic depth. You can also open 3 of your fruit supplements and mix the powder into a smoothie, or sprinkle 3 of the veggie supplements over one of the savory dishes that you're having for dinner. It's called Balance of Nature's Whole Health System. These supplements include 47 ingredients of 100% whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers, perfect for your daily routine. 50% off if you do it now for 1 year when you subscribe to the Whole Health System from our friends at Balance of Nature. Get it at balanceofnature.com. Oh boy, Kentucky windage. I love that. Tuesday. No, it's not Tuesday yet. Feels like it. That's how much work I've been doing this morning. It already feels like Tuesday to me. It's Monday. It's Monday, January the 19th. Scott's in Kentucky today, by the way. Thanks for joining us here on Salem. By the way, I am still just... I played it for you in the first segment. This footage of these people storming into this church, I'm outraged by this. And I mentioned to you that they were looking at, the federal prosecutors are looking at the FACE Act. There's something else now circulating out there. They may be looking at using the KKK Act of 1871 against Don Lemon and all these radical protesters. Now, I was looking into this, and we'll talk to Mike Davis about it at 33 minutes past the hour. The KKK Act of 1871, and I'm reading this to you, made interfering with voting rights and other civil liberties a federal offense. It was targeting Klan violence like intimidation, conspiracy, and mass terrorism. It also made state officials at that time liable in federal court for failing to protect citizens' civil rights. Now, again, I'm going to ask Mike Davis, a real lawyer, about all this here in a few minutes. But do you believe that Tim Walz and Jacob Fry are doing everything they can do to protect the civil rights of random, peaceful people in Minneapolis right now? Did they do anything to help those worshipers at the Baptist church who got harassed by Don Lemon and his group? Doesn't look like they were. Not only that, but I look at all these videos online, and I see protesters harassing people who have like an American flag on their sweatshirt, or they're wearing the wrong kind of hat, or they're driving the wrong kind of vehicle, and they're being harassed in the street. Are you ICE? Are you ICE? Are you ICE? They're threatening people. I see all this, and I don't see the police. Where are the cops in Minneapolis? Have they been told to stand down? Because if they have, it seems to me the KKK Act of 1871 could be applicable here. So this was all, by the way, passed by Congress to give Ulysses S. Grant some tools to combat the rising violence of the KKK, which was terrorizing people all over the place, particularly in the South. But they may be bringing it back. We'll talk to Mike Davis about it here at 33 minutes past the hour. Quick note on CNN last night. Speaking of civil rights era issues, I did a little panel last night. Came in on a Sunday night. Yes, I'm the hardest working man in show business. Absolutely true. Came in last night, and I had to debate a Democrat strategist, we'll use that term loosely, named Julie Rodzinski. I've been on with her many times over the years. She's a little out there, fairly liberal, fairly radical. That's fine. Everybody has a right to an opinion. But we had this little exchange. She was going crazy about the immigration issue, and then she ended up accusing me, or, quote, people like me, of using fire hoses on folks crossing the bridge in Selma in 1965. Now, mind you, I wasn't born until 1977, so sorry to pop the balloon on that, but I wasn't there. But we had a little back and forth about who in fact actually in Alabama in the 60s was opposed to civil rights, who was terrorizing the marchers on the bridge, the brave protesters in Selma. Let's listen to cut 3.
You listen to Scott and you listen to all this rhetoric coming out of the Republican Party. These are the same people that defended opening fire hoses on protesters in the 60s on the Selma Bridge. I mean, these are people who consistently
I think those were Democrats, Julie. Just FYI, those are Democrats.
Scott,
those were Democrats in the 60s.
Scott, people like you
that was your party.
Exactly that kind of behavior.
But thank you for reminding everybody that Democrats were against civil rights.
How about this, Scott? Why don't you let me finish and stop interrupting? Because clearly, whenever anybody tries
You're the one that brought up Democrats. I agree with you. Democrats shouldn't have been against civil rights.
You're the person. Well, there you go. How about this, Scott? Why don't you continue talking, and I'll just sit here and listen to you.
You know
Go
what,
ahead.
guys?
I think you want to finish.
I think we all have each other's X handles where we can continue this conversation.
Oh, and we did continue it. I issued that clip on my own X account. It has over 700,000 views right now. I mean, it's amazing to me that this immigration issue has caused Democrats like Julie and others, to be fair, she's not the only one, to totally lose their minds and start throwing out wild accusations and misrepresenting history. It was Democrats in Alabama, by the way, in the 60s who were opposed to civil rights. Walz was the governor down there. Democrats all over the South, they were in charge of all the states that had Jim Crow laws. It was Republicans who actually fought for civil rights. Abraham Lincoln, Republican president. Republicans in Congress passing the Civil Rights Act. I mean, I'm not going to let somebody get away with rewriting history here. That's one of the reasons I'm proud to be a Republican, because of our proud history on these issues. Anyway, if you missed it last night, and chances are you did, I thought I'd bring it to you. When we come back, the Viceroy is here. We're going to talk about this church invasion in Minneapolis. What federal charges could Don Lemon be facing? We'll find out from Mike Davis when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American people. It's Monday, January 19th. Scott Jennings here, Common Sense for the American people. I got to tell you, I think these guys in Minneapolis, these radicals, these Don Lemon-led protesters have messed up badly for a couple of reasons. One, if you think about the immigration issues going on in Minnesota as partly a public relations battle, I think they really stepped in it here. And number two, if you consider what they did to be possibly illegal, they clearly have stepped in it. And to discuss that aspect of what's going on, I welcome back to the show the founder and president of the Article 3 Project, my friend, the pride of Iowa, the Viceroy of Washington, D.C., Mike Davis, joining us on the phone. Welcome back to the Scott Jennings Show.
Thank you, Scott. I'm glad to be back.
Well, I'm glad you're here because we need to sort out this attack on this church. By the way, I want to get your thoughts on this. If I were attending a church service in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and a bunch of people stormed in the front door screaming and terrorizing all the assembled, you know where my mind would go? It would go back to August 27th of last year, when a shooter showed up at the Catholic Church in Minneapolis and killed 2 kids, 30 people injured, 26 kids among them. A 10-year-old and an 8-year-old died in this. That's where my mind would be. Because in Minneapolis, we just had somebody shoot up a church. Then you have all these people storming into a church. That's the first thing I would think of, Mike. I mean, people in Minneapolis have a right to be on edge about this stuff.
Yeah, what Don Lemon and these other criminals have done here is absolutely despicable. And I think this is going to backfire spectacularly on them. You do not go into a church and disrupt the services of a church because you have a political disagreement. That is crossing the brightest red line imaginable by doing that. And not only that, is it just politically disgusting. It's a very serious federal crime under the Federal Faith Act, which outlaws physical obstruction of both abortion clinics and churches, synagogues, mosques. You could not go in to a place of worship and disrupt their service. That is a federal felony, and I strongly suspect that Attorney General Pam Bondi and Harmeet Dillon, who is the head of the Civil Rights Division, 2 all-star warriors for the Constitution, will be bringing criminal indictments, and I expect that will happen this week.
Okay, Mike, let's talk about these two laws. The FACE Act, this is the Freedom of Access to Clinical Entrances Act of 1994, a federal law that prohibits using force, threats, or physical obstruction to block people from obtaining or providing reproductive health services or exercising religious freedom at a place of worship. It also forbids damaging such facilities or churches. It was enacted in response to violence against abortion clinics, protecting patients and providers from intimidation, and so on and so forth. This was passed in 1994. You say, because of the video evidence that we have and everything that we've seen about this, you are ready to pronounce clear and conclusive violations of the FACE Act. Is that right?
There's no question. If you just watch Don Lemon's videos that he posted, Don Lemon must be the dumbest person in America. He was not acting as an objective reporter. He was an agitator. And reporters do not have they're not free to trespass. They're not free to disrupt services. Now that he's been caught, he's acting like he was just there as a reporter, but he's not. He's an agitator. The evidence is very clear, and he should be indicted under the federal FACE Act this week. There's no question about it. He went in there with other agitators with the express intent to disrupt the church service because they thought the pastor was associated with ICE. Well, that is a textbook violation of the federal FACE Act, which is a felony. And you saw the Biden Justice Department hunting down Christians who were praying at abortion clinics, including 75-year-old Christians who they threw in prison for years. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. There's no question that Don Lemon should be indicted under the FACE Act, charged with this felony, and jailed.
Okay, let's queue up, guys, back in the booth. Let's queue up cut 15. This is Don Lemon. I want to play this for you, Mike. Let's listen to Don Lemon. This is him on video inside this church. It's a little bit of a long clip here, but let's listen to Don Lemon. And, Mike, I want to get your reaction to what we're going to hear out of Don Lemon here. Cut 15. Let's play it.
I don't necessarily agree with everything that's going on in the Twin Cities right now, but I don't think it's good to fight fire with fire. I think it's good to speak up, and I think it's good to protest, but I think it's better to do it in a peaceful way. I don't think the answer is going into God's church.
You don't think this is peaceful?
Well, it's trespassing.
Nobody fighting.
It's trespassing. How would you feel if I went into your house and I started yelling?
It depends on what I did, but not in my house. That's a whole different thing. I think these people would go inside of anybody's house.
This is a house of God.
Which makes it everybody's house.
Yes, it is. But in a house, people don't yell at each other.
Yeah. There's a lot of yelling in my house growing up. We still loved each other.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that yelling is the answer, right?
I'm sorry?
It doesn't necessarily mean yelling is the answer, right?
No, but I think it's the way you work things out is that you talk to each other, you disagree. Sometimes it's heated, sometimes it's not. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I think maybe if the pastor would try to calm things down and say, let's all talk together and make this peaceful and not be so us against them.
I think that it's good to talk, but then why don't we do that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think trespassing, I think protesting on the streets is fine, but I think there's a difference between that and then going into someone's property.
Okay, Mike, that was Don Lemon talking with one of the parishioners. Don Lemon at one point in that clip said, quote, "This is everybody's house." There's other video of him explaining to the pastor that he has a First Amendment right to invade the church. Don Lemon apparently believes that he can barge into a church and terrorize parishioners in a church. He clearly believes this is his constitutionally protected right to do so. I assume you disagree, Mike.
I mean, it's outrageous to listen to this. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I wouldn't say I'm the best Christian, but it's just outrageous where these people think they can go into a church or a mosque or a synagogue or any other place of worship and disrupt this. But you had Don Lemon going into this. He clearly was conspiring with these other agitators. He didn't just randomly go up to the church. And Don Lemon actually went up to the pastor who was leading the prayer service, the church service, and shoved a microphone in his face. I mean, you could not get more of a Facebook violation than this. This is textbook. Again, There is no question that the Trump Justice Department must indict Don Lemon this week and put his ass in prison.
Okay, Mike, let's talk about the other law that may have been violated that has been floated. This is the KKK Act of 1871, a Reconstruction-era piece of legislation that gave Ulysses S. Grant, the president at the time, the power to suppress the KKK and other white supremacist groups. It made interfering with voting rights and other civil liberties a federal offense. It authorized the president to use federal troops to enforce the law. It also made state officials liable in federal court for failing to protect citizens' rights. Some people are saying, Mike, that the KKK Act of 1871 could be applicable here. Do you also see it that way in addition to the FACE Act?
Yeah, because today's Democrats are the Confederate Party. They want to fight the federal government on the enforcement of federal laws like our immigration laws, and their agitators act like they're Klan members. I think it's on point exactly. You have private citizens conspiring to violate the constitutional rights of Americans. In this case, people exercise the free exercise of religion at a church service is directly on point. It's another felony for which Don Lemon and his co-conspirators should be charged.
What do you think about this part of the law that at the time would have held state officials liable for failing to protect the civil liberties of their citizens? I mean, I'll be honest. Tim Walz and Jacob Fry have had a lot to say over the last several days about ICE and about Donald Trump. I'm not hearing too much out of them. About this church invasion. They seem to be, I mean, look, I think they've already crossed the line, but they've done nothing, obviously, to protect this church. Could they be liable under this? Is that something the federal DOJ should be looking at?
Absolutely, and I think both Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry should be indicted because they are absolutely encouraging obstruction and even violence against federal law enforcement doing their jobs, executing federal laws. That is a seditious conspiracy. That is insurrection. That is assault on federal law enforcement. It is conspiracy. Generally, it's harboring illegal aliens. It's a violation of this KKK statute to have their police stand down and allow mobs to attack Americans for exercising their constitutional rights. We're in territory we haven't seen for 100 years, since the Klan was running around lynching people and burning down churches and terrorizing people in churches. That's what today's Democrat Party has become. They have become today's Confederate Party and the party of the Klan.
Well, to be fair to them, Mike, they were also the party of the Confederates back in those days as well. So it's not as though they've transitioned. they've always been the party. I mean, this is the Democrats. They've, I got into it on CNN last night over this. Somebody accused me personally and other Republicans of attacking protesters in Selma in 1965. I had to remind my sparring partner, that was the Democrats. I'm a Republican. I'm in the party of Abraham Lincoln. We're talking to Mike Davis. He's the founder and director of the Article 3 Project in Washington, D.C. You've probably seen Mike on cable news. He is a great lawyer. He is known amongst his friends and amongst those who are terrified of him as the Viceroy of Washington, D.C. He has unique insights into what's going on in the Trump administration, particularly in the Trump Department of Justice. And we're discussing whether Don Lemon and other radical protesters will face federal charges for invading a church in Minneapolis. When we come back, Mike, I'm going to play you the clip of Don Lemon confronting that church pastor. I'm going to play that on the other side of this break and get your reaction to it. First, a quick word from our friends at Relief Factor. One of the most rewarding things about Relief Factor is it's a product that we talk about a lot on the Scott Jennings Show, and then we hear back from the customers. And it's very rewarding when you are pitching something, when you're vouching for something, that when you are taking it personally, like we are in the Jennings household, that you hear back from others who say, I heard about this on the radio, I tried it, and it worked for me. Here's a lady named Sandra. Here's in her own words. She says, quote, with the 3-week quick start, I went for it, and now I feel like a new person. That's Sandra. That's her own words. Don't take it from me. Take it from Sandra. She did the 3-week quick start, and it was a game changer for her. So here's how you can do it. It's 1-800-4, the number 4 relief, 1-800-4-relief, or go to relieffactor.com. Ask yourself a question. How will it feel to get rid of the pain? If it would feel amazing, and I bet it would, do yourself a favor and try the 3-week quick start today. When we come back, the audio of Don Lemon confronting the church pastor and Mike Davis's reaction. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here. Stay with us. Monday, January 19th. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here on Salem. My guest is Article 3 Project founder and director Mike Davis, a respected attorney in Washington, D.C., and the pride of Iowa. Mike, I want to play something for you. We have the video and the audio here of Don Lemon confronting the church pastor in the pulpit in a church yesterday morning in Minneapolis. Let's play that and get your reaction.
It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked if you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to
unless you're here to worship. Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship.
Okay, Mike Davis, that was Don Lemon confronting the pastor of that church. And he said that, we live under a Constitution and a First Amendment. We have a right to assemble and protest. Is Don Lemon right? Does he have a right to take a group of radicals into any private property that he wants and protest in people's faces and terrorize children, yes or no?
Absolutely not. And what Don Lemon is doing here is outrageous, and it's felonious. You do not have a First Amendment right to trespass onto private property. You do not have a First Amendment right to disrupt church services. That is a federal felony under the FACE Act and probably the KKK Act as well. It's unbelievable that he thinks that he can do this, that he's that entitled, he's that stupid, that he thinks he can go into a church like this and conspire with agitators to shut down a church service. Just imagine if Trump supporters and MAGA hats went into a black church and did this, or went into a synagogue and did this, or a mosque and did this. It's just totally unacceptable, and Don Lemon needs to go to prison.
Yeah, I often look at these situations and I say, what if the shoes were on the other feet? What if you totally changed the details here? What if, I don't know, the Proud Boys or people in MAGA hats or anyone else that would be viewed in the mainstream media as of a different persuasion than Don Lemon and his radicals went into any kind of a house of worship? Let's say they went into, I don't know, a predominantly black church, and went up to a pastor in a pulpit, shoved a camera in their face, began aggressively questioning them in front of the parishioners, children crying and screaming and running out in terror. We would be in 24/7 cable news coverage, every channel. Everybody would be locked in on this right now, wouldn't they, Mike? I mean, that is the truth. If the shoes were on the other feet, and if it weren't lunatic liberals invading a Baptist church, if it were the other way around, we would be in wall-to-wall coverage of the terrorism in Minneapolis. And that is the truth, Mike.
Absolutely. And one of these BLM activists, one of these co-conspirators of Don Lemon, these agitators who went to this church 5 years ago, targeted a Minnesota reporter at her home with her family in her home, trespassed with a whole bunch of other protesters, agitators onto her property and put these signs all over her yard. And you do not have a First Amendment right to target people in their homes. You do not have a First Amendment right to target people in these churches like this. These are crimes. And this agitator, this woman got away with this 5 years ago, and now she's emboldened and back 5 years later, she's emboldened enough where she thinks she can go in with Don Lemon and disrupt a church service. These people must face consequences. There has to be punishment here. There has to be deterrence, or this is going to get worse.
That's Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project. He believes that Don Lemon and the radicals who invaded the church have clearly violated federal law, possibly the KKK Act, certainly the FACE Act. It says here, Mike, that the violations can result in fines and imprisonment up to 3 years for subsequent offenses, significant civil penalties depending on the severity of it all. We'll see what the Department of Justice wants to do. That voice you've been hearing, Mike Davis, find him at the Article 3 Project online on social media. He is an invaluable resource. That is the end of Hour 1. When we come up after the top of this hour for Hour 2, more breaking news, and Congressman Randy Fine is here. Stay with us. It's Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings. Hey, Scott Jennings here. I want to personally invite you to join me, along with my friend Mike Gallagher, for a powerful week on the Gulf of America cruise, November 14th through November 21st, 2026. That's this year. We'll cruise through crystal blue waters, visit incredible ports like Half Moon Cay and Cozumel, and enjoy the first-class hospitality of a luxury cruise ship. All week long, you'll have time with us. You'll do meet and greets, photo opportunities, Q&A sessions, and the chance to hear behind-the-scenes stories that you can't or won't hear on the air. You'll also be immersed in inspiring keynote speeches and in-depth sessions as we enjoy real connection designed to strengthen your resolve as we mark the 250th anniversary of our great nation. Don't miss this. Sign up today. Look forward to cruising the Caribbean with like-minded people who care deeply about our country. Reserve your cabin today by clicking the link or scanning this QR code.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Hour number 2. It is Monday, January the 19th. Scott Jennings is here with Common Sense for the American people on Salem. We are covering all the breaking news today, and there's a ton of it, principally following everything going on in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're looking at the aftermath of the invasion by radical protesters into a Baptist church Sunday morning in Minnesota. Many people are saying, including several legal experts, that Don Lemon, who was there, and the radical protesters should face federal charges under the FACE Act and possibly the KKK Act of 1871. So we're going to see how quickly the Trump administration and the DOJ wants to move on that. In addition to invading Baptist churches in Minneapolis, the radical protesters are now invading Target. This just into the Scott Jennings Show. I am looking at video of liberal women sitting in the floor of a Target. They are mad. They want to shut down the Target because Target was letting ICE agents use the bathroom. We have liberal white women on the floor of the Target here on MLK Day demanding separate but equal bathrooms in Minneapolis, Minnesota, if you can believe it. I know it sounds like the craziest Mad Libs you could possibly imagine, but it is literally happening in Minneapolis, where people have obviously lost their minds. Joining me at the top of this hour for the Scott Jennings Show, Congressman Randy Fine, representing Florida's 6th Congressional District, is here to discuss these out-of-control Democrats and other stories. Randy, thanks for coming back to the Scott Jennings Show, and I want to get your gut reaction to what we're seeing in Minneapolis. Is it time for the president to invoke the Insurrection Act and bring order to this place that's clearly out of order?
Well, thanks for having me again. Look, we've got to put this down because the future of America is at stake. If the left can behave this way, demand that Target not let people use the bathroom, go in and shut down church services, I don't care what their reason is. This cannot be allowed in the United States of America. And if it is allowed, if we make excuses for it, it will become more and more widespread. I know if they tried this in Florida, they would end up in a very different result, but it doesn't matter where you are in the United States. If you want to go to church or synagogue, you should not be interrupted because of politics.
Yeah, I've talked to Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project last hour, and he is echoing a lot of legal experts who say these are clear violations of federal law. To me, and I'm interested in your reaction to this, if the Trump administration and DOJ does not move on this immediately, it is going to proliferate. You're going to see more people invading churches. You're going to see more people who feel emboldened to clearly violate federal laws and people's civil rights. I am in agreement with you. Something has to happen now. The longer nothing happens, the more people feel like they can do it. And this will have a snowball effect there in Minneapolis and probably in other cities, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it will lead to violence and bloodshed. I can tell you, if they tried this in Florida, they would probably be met by people who would stand their ground. We do not need people to get hurt over this sort of thing. The left is playing with fire. We saw that when you had the person try to run over the ICE agent. They're now doing it in churches. This is out of hand. Remember, ICE is simply trying to round up foreign invaders. Americans are not even the target of any of this. So to stand with foreign invaders over Americans, it's very, very troubling. And we've got to say there's a zero tolerance policy for this stuff.
Yeah, Governor Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis, honorary Somali pirate Jacob Fry, it is amazing to me the lengths to which they are going to encourage people to engage in this insurrection, to defend having Minneapolis and Minnesota as a whole being a haven for illegal immigration. We're talking about people here who are murderers, rapists, pedophiles, people who've committed all sorts of heinous acts. This is who ICE has arrested. And what's really at play, and of course the debate that gets lost in all this sensational video, is that the reason ICE is in Minneapolis in the numbers they are is because Walz and Fry will not permit ICE to go into the jails like what's happening in cities and states across the country and do very simple administrative transfers in the jail. So in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, they get an illegal alien who's violent criminal. They let them back out onto the street. Then you have to have ICE go find them and chase them down. That's why ICE is there. A little cooperation here would probably set everything to rights, but you're just not getting that out of the Democrats in Minnesota.
No, and that's because it's a maybe a voter that goes away. What is clear is this is part of a left-wing experiment to raid our treasury, fill us with illegal votes. And what's going on is nuts. And you hear about the kinds of people that they are releasing and that ICE is catching up. They make it sound like we're picking up grandmas who've lived in the country for 50 years. Well, I don't know a lot of grandmas who are raping and murdering little children, which are the kinds of people they're picking up. These are the scum of the earth that ICE is going after. And for Democrats to literally go into churches and disrupt families just trying to pray in order to protect rapists and murderers, it just shows how far the left has fallen. And we simply can't allow this. This has to be put down.
And listen to the language. They refer to these people as our neighbors and important members of our community. I don't know about you, but I don't want rapists and murderers and pedophiles being my neighbor. I would like them to be taken away and sent far, far away from my neighborhood. Randy Fine's our guest, congressman from Florida, the Hebrew Hammer, as he's known on Capitol Hill. Randy, let me ask you a question on a different story. There have been shocking revelations from Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who is writing in a new memoir that when he was interviewed by Kamala Harris and her staff for vice president to be put on the Democratic ticket in 2024, they asked him if he was ever an Israeli double agent. And obviously, he was not happy about this. He did not get on the ticket. They chose the buffoon Tim Walz instead. When you read these revelations from Shapiro, what was your reaction?
Well, I wish I could say I was surprised, but I wasn't. You know, on the anti-Semitic left, being Jewish means that you must be a dual citizen and you must have dual loyalties. You know, I never even went to Israel till I was in my 30s, but that doesn't stop people from making these suggestions. And I think for Jews that are in the Democratic Party, they need to take a hard look at how Shapiro was treated. Because, by the way, had the Democrats picked him, I think it would have been a tougher road for us in beating them in 2024. But no, I'm not surprised, because I see how people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and even Jeffries himself treat Jewish Americans. It's appalling, and we shouldn't be surprised. We should take note. This shows just how delusional the left has become.
In addition to being asked if he were an Israeli double agent, they also asked him if he would consider apologizing for comments that he made about some of the Free Palestine encampments. It, in my opinion, shows that the Harris-Biden Democratic regime was obsessed with Israel, and they were also obsessed with trying to find ways to support these lawless encampments, even asking Josh Shapiro to apologize. The man had the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania burned down by one of these Free Palestine radicals. It's incredible.
Well, Scott,
and
I think
suspect
it's more
that
than
is
that.
still... Yeah.
Yeah, Scott, I think it's more than that. I think that they are pushing mainstream Muslim terror, and you can see that today. Where are the encampments for what's going on in Iran? Where are the street protests in New York City, people blocking streets and bridges? Where are these over the country when you have thousands and thousands of innocent Muslims in Iran being shot? These people are suddenly incredibly silent. And so I think it's much more than Israel. I think it's much more than Jews. I think it really is embracing an anti-Western, anti-American, pro-terrorism agenda, and that's something everyone should be frightened about.
That voice you're hearing, Congressman Randy Fine of Florida. We're going to talk about some comments made by one of your colleagues, Congressman Fine, Ilhan Omar, when we come back after this commercial break. First, a word from our friends at Patriot Mobile. Very excited about getting Patriot Mobile here into the Scott Jennings Show. Most people don't know this, but Patriot Mobile is more than just a wireless provider. They are an activist organization funded by selling top-tier cell phone service, and they are always on the front lines of defending our freedoms, and they will stand in the gap when other companies will not do it. As a cell phone provider, they give you premium service across all 3 major networks. In fact, you'll get the same or even better coverage. It is a 100% U.S.-based customer support team, and when you switch to Patriot Mobile, you are growing a movement that fuels the Christian conservative cause. Every bill you pay advances the values of faith, family, and freedom. I met with these guys last week. I could not have been more impressed. We're switching over ourselves here at the Scott Jennings Show. You can do it. It's easy. It'll take just a few minutes. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade it. I don't care. Just do it. PatriotMobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT. Use the promo code Scott and they will give you a free month of service. PatriotMobile.com/Scott, 972-PATRIOT. Make the switch today. More with Randy Fine when we come back. It's common sense for the American people. This just into the Scott Jennings Show, a statement from Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. She says, and I'll quote, "To those asking where the arrests are, Minnesota state prosecutors could have made arrests yesterday." She's referencing, by the way, the invasion at the Baptist church. "The Department of Justice must first go before a federal judge to obtain an arrest warrant. Make no mistake, Pam Bondi and the Justice Department will pursue federal charges in this case." That is a statement from Harmeet Dillon. She is referencing the Don Lemon invasion at the Baptist church on Sunday morning. Guys, let's cue up Cut 19. We had this at the top of the show. Here are the protesters at the Target. If you're watching the video feed, by the way, on snc.tv, I'm going to show you the protesters here. These are the women sitting in at the Target. Let's show them.
We are one. We won't stop fighting. We won't stop fighting. Till ICE is gone. Till ICE is gone.
By the way, God help us all. They're singing again. So
Target says that their mission is to support the joy of everyday life for all families.
What they want is for Oregon to not allow ICE.
Then do it.
So they're asking for a separate but equal
Justice over profit.
Is Randy Fine, Congressman from Florida. Hearing that statement from Harmeet Dillon, Congressman Fine, it does sound like you're going to get your wish, and it sounds like the Department of Justice is going after federal charges in Minneapolis. This is a good thing, no?
Absolutely, because if we don't do this, it will make people believe that they can engage in this behavior. Part of what is wrong in Minneapolis is people are able to behave like monsters and nothing happens to them. We can't allow that. Look, we saw it 5 years ago during the mostly peaceful protests that they did there, where people were allowed to get away with it. If that hadn't happened, we might not be where we are right now. So making it clear that you cannot go into a church where there are families praying, screaming and yelling and causing problems, I think making sure those people go to jail is critically important. I know if this had happened in Florida, that would have happened, if not more.
Let me pivot to another person from Minnesota we have to talk about. One of your colleagues in the House, Representative Ilhan Omar. She was talking this weekend. Let's play cut 5. Here's Ilhan Omar talking about what she thinks of the United States of America. Let's hear it.
The one place where we thought we would never experience this is the U.S. states.
Now, let me just tell you, I had to beep it out because this is a family-friendly program, Congressman Fine, but she took the Lord's name in vain in referencing the United States of America. Now, this is a woman who had a negative net worth just a couple of years ago and is now worth $30 million and sits in the United States Congress. And she couldn't be madder about being in the United States. When you hear Ilhan Omar reference our country that way, what goes through your mind?
Well, look, she's a disgusting person who not only shouldn't be in Congress, she shouldn't be in the United States at all. This is someone who came to this country as a supposed refugee, has been given every opportunity, has led her community engaged in the largest welfare fraud in the history of the country, and literally laughs and despises us. These people hate America. She should be denaturalized. She should be deported, and she should be the Pied Piper of all of these Somalis going home. The level of disrespect she shows to this country should make every American sick.
Let me get 30 seconds from you on this, Randy. There are reports in British media that the Trump administration is considering granting asylum to British Jews who are looking to flee the UK as rising anti-Semitism there has made conditions unsafe. Would you support the Trump administration granting asylum to British Jews who no longer feel safe in Great Britain?
I would, because you know what I know would happen if they came here? They'd appreciate being here. They wouldn't ask for handouts. They would just ask for the kind of opportunities that my family asked for when they came here 125 years ago. And so the fact of the matter is the UK is not safe for Jews anymore. They've embraced mainstream Islam in a major way. I actually have distant relatives that are British, and I know they don't feel safe today. And so I absolutely support the president if that's the decision that he wants to make.
A beacon of moral clarity in the United States House. His name is Randy Fine. He's congressman from Florida. Randy, thank you for coming back to the Scott Jennings Show. You're welcome here anytime.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks for fighting for us every day.
You got it, brother. Common sense for the American people. You'll get it from Randy Fine. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to interview Mark Dubowitz. He is the CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. I want to drill in on what's going on in Iran and what Donald Trump's next moves should or could be. It's common sense for the American people. Stay with us here on Salem. Okay, it's Monday, January 19th. Scott Jennings, common sense for the American people here on Salem. Thank you for joining us. Boy, it's been a day for breaking news. Tracking all of the breaking developments out of Minnesota. Sounds like the federal government, the Department of Justice, is going to pursue charges against the people who invaded the Baptist church on Sunday morning. Thankful for that. There are other things going on in the world that we need to talk about. It on the line to do so, Mark Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's also host of the Iran Breakdown podcast. He is sanctioned by Iran and Russia, badges of honor. So here to discuss all of these issues is Mark Dubowitz. Mark, thanks for making your inaugural appearance on the Scott Jennings Show.
Scott, thank you. Really honored to be on.
Okay, first of all, I like to get this out of the way up front. To find Mark Dubowitz on the X platform, he's at M. Dubowitz. And to find the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, you're at FDD. I always encourage my listeners to follow along on social media. You're following the situation with Iran as closely as anybody can be. President Trump has told the Iranians to keep protesting and that help is on the way. And some people were expecting American military intervention last week. That did not happen. The president then appeared to take some credit because he believed that the public hangings of some protesters had been put off based on his threats. We went through the weekend and nothing has happened. Let me just give you a couple of questions here. Number one, what is the situation in the streets of Iran right now for these protesters? And number two, what do you believe is happening at the highest levels of the U.S. government as President Trump considers how to engage next with these butchers in Tehran?
Well, Scott, I mean, the numbers are hard to come by, but we think certainly thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Iranians have been killed, tens of thousands have been arrested, tortured, a number have been executed. And the question now is, what is going on? What kind of information is reaching the president? It's clear that the regime has killed its way through these protests and will continue to do so. So I am not optimistic at all that the supreme leader, or the extreme leader, as I call him, Ali Khamenei, is listening to the president and is going to stop this extreme violence against his own people. I think at the highest levels, the president was tempted to do something last week, but was told by his senior commanders and by allies in the region that it would be best if the United States had military assets, including the USS Lincoln, which is a carrier strike group, which is now on its way from the South China Sea to the Mediterranean, to have those military assets at his disposal if he were to actually take military action.
So your belief is that the decision to strike Iran is still sitting out there, and that it may be that the president is moving the correct military pieces into place. The question that I have, and that I think a lot of Americans have, is if you are going to do something in Iran here, if you're Donald Trump and you get involved in this, you want to know that you are going to affect an outcome. As we sit here today, how close is the Iranian regime to collapsing on its own, or can it only collapse if the United States or other partners get involved in striking the regime?
I think it's close, and I think it's going to require maximum support for the Iranian people, who really, literally over 1 million of them were on the streets over a week protesting against this regime, yelling death to the dictator. The regime is facing economic collapse. It can't provide water to its people. Its axis of misery, or axis of resistance, as they call it, got severely degraded by the Israelis. Their nuclear program has been shattered by a combination of U.S. and Israeli military force. So there's no doubt the regime is weaker than it's ever been since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. But it's going to require also an external push from the outside, as well as support for Iranians on the streets. And I think that external push is what the president needs to do. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean military action. It certainly means double downing on the economic pressure, the diplomatic isolation. It could mean cyber attacks. It could mean covert warfare in combination with the Israelis. But I think military strikes at this point are going to be crucial, not just to help the Iranians, but for the credibility of the red line that the president set. I mean, he made it very clear, quote, help is on its way, take over your institutions. He's effectively called the Iranians to take to the streets and to precipitate regime change. I think for the sake of the United States, for our credibility, our deterrence, the message we're sending to enemies around the world, the president's got to follow through. We could talk about what that means, but I think some form of kinetic military action is going to be required.
Well, you alluded to my next question here. People are asking the president, or expecting the president possibly, to engage with the military, striking Iran. What would that look like? What are the strategic targets in a situation like this? Do you go back to military bases? We struck the nuclear sites, obviously, last summer. Do you go right after the regime leaders if you know where they are? Do you strike those facilities? Do you go after energy infrastructure? What would the target package look like if you were trying to rapidly bring about the fall of the regime?
I think the most important symbolic strike would be to kill the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. I think that would, first of all, enjoy massive support inside Iran. I think the majority of Iranians would celebrate that day, given the almost 5 decades of brutal repression that the mullahs have been responsible for. I think the most important strategic military target, Scott, is to take out the remaining ballistic missile infrastructure. The Israelis did a pretty good job of that during the 12-day war last June, but there's still probably 50% of that ballistic missile military infrastructure that remains, and the Iranians are reconstituting. And there's no doubt, Scott, in my mind, that the Israelis are going to go back and hit it again. And I think it's better we hit it than let the Israelis do it. Because we bring much more firepower to be able to actually destroy these underground facilities that have these ballistic missiles. Second is the Iranian ballistic missile program. They're developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. And that's the threat, not Israel or our Gulf allies. That's the threat in the American homeland. We need to destroy that program. And third, I think the Iranians will be much more reticent about hitting us and hitting our allies if we do it than if the Israelis do it. I think if the Israelis do it, we'll be right back in a war, and we will be implicated in that anyway, and we'll have to handle the consequences of that strike. So I think going after the strategic missile program of the Iranians would be a very important hit. And then third is, and you've alluded to it, is to go after Revolutionary Guard bases, the bases of the security forces, the Basij, Ministry of Intelligence, the law enforcement forces, those who were so responsible for the massacre that just took place last week.
There's been a lot of conjecture online about whether the Ayatollah would flee Iran and other senior government officials would flee if they thought an American strike was imminent. Do you expect that? Do you expect them to run away and leave the country, or do you expect them to stand in and accept their fate? What's the most likely thing we'll see out of the top levels of the regime?
So there's three elements of the regime. Let's start with the extreme leader, Ali Khamenei. I think he will stay. I don't think he's fleeing anywhere. He's a true believer, and he's going to go down with the ship, go down with the regime. I think the second element are a small percentage of the elite, the remaining true believers. I think that at the beginning of the Islamic Revolution, probably 80% of them were true believers and 20% were crooks. And now, all these years later, 20% are true believers and 80% are crooks. I think the crooks are going to look for a way out. They're already moving their money, their families, and assets abroad, and we've seen huge flows of money, particularly to places like Dubai, in recent weeks as members of the elite move their money and families out. And then the true believers, whatever percentage that is, are going to be there to make the last stand with Khamenei. So three different elements, and I think the most important thing we can do is really crack the support base, the elite of the regime, and make it very clear that those who want a future, we can work with them, but those who've got massive blood on their hands are going to have to go down.
That voice you're hearing is Mark Dubowitz. He's the CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, also host of the Iran Breakdown podcast. Mark, I want to keep it in the Middle East. In addition to what's going on with Iran, the president has announced the constitution of his Gaza Peace Board. This was part of the president's 20-point plan to bring the living hostages back from Gaza, back into Israel, and to try to move this situation into something peaceful and end the war between Israel and the terrorists in Gaza. Interested in your reaction to the initial constitution of the Peace Board, and generally, how do you think it's going? Is the president succeeding in moving this situation into something that could lead to a lasting peace in the Middle East?
The president's done extraordinary work. I mean, as you say, he got all the live hostages back, most of the bodies of the hostages back except one remaining. We should never lose. We should always remember that one remaining and the suffering that the family is going through waiting for their loved ones' remains to be returned. And I think the president is, really has, again, done an extraordinary job. But I think as we move to phase two, there's huge risks yet. First is that Hamas has no intention to disarm. The second is that Turkey and Qatar have every intention of ensuring that Hamas doesn't disarm. So they are not allies, but rather they are adversaries with respect to the president's objective, which is the full disarmament of Hamas, without which there's no peace. There's continued bloodshed, and God forbid there may be another October 7th. So I think the one area of concern, and you're hearing that from the Israelis, is that the president has appointed senior Qatari and Turkish officials to this peace board. And, Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it very clear there's no way the Turks and the Qataris are going to be allowed to have that level of involvement. They funded Hamas in the first place. They supported Hamas. They provided weapons and intelligence to Hamas. And to have them at the table is would be deeply problematic for Israeli security.
That voice is Mark Dubowitz. He's the CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. I want you to hold that thought, Mark, because we may talk a little bit more about the Middle East when we come back. I also want to ask you about the situation in Ukraine. That seems to have fallen out of the news as we focus on Iran and other issues. I want to talk to you about Venezuela as well. Again, we're talking with Mark Dubowitz, the CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Before we take a break, beginning today, I am going to begin sharing with you, my audience, our listeners here at Salem, some personal stories from people who are taking and benefiting from Relief Factor. It is a drug-free supplement that has, for thousands of people, relieved their everyday pain. Now, we have taken the time to talk to real-life customers of Relief Factor, and we're going to bring you their real news stories about how they have benefited from taking Relief Factor. Today we hear from Brian from Alabama.
Hello, my name is Brian Delatry, and I started taking Relief Factor just about a year ago. I was having chronic knee pain. Over time, it just got worse and worse. Just walking downstairs was painful. Well, since I've taken Relief Factor, the results have been just amazing. I actually walk 4 miles a day, 5 to 6 days a week. No pain at all going downstairs. Very active playing golf, and it's been really just unbelievable in the change I've had in the pain in my knee. Hope that someone who's experienced the same type of pain gives Relief Factor a try. And I guarantee if you get the results that I have, you'll be very happy. I'm going to continue using the product because I am now pain-free.
Look, folks are going to try to sell you a lot of things. The most powerful thing you can know and hear is from someone like Brian, who is telling you the truth. It has worked for him. My advice, launch your 3-week quick start and see what Relief Factor can do for you. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or go to relieffactor.com. Ask yourself, how would it feel to be out of pain? You can find out with Relief Factor. More with Mark Dubowitz when we come back. It's Scott Jennings and Common Sense for the American People. Stay with us. Monday, January 19th, home stretch here of Common Sense for the American People. On the line, Mark Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mark, thanks for making time for us today. I want to get your thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine. This seems to have fallen out of the news somewhat. What is your understanding of the status of the attempts by the Trump administration to broker a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia at this moment?
Scott, it seems stalled, and I think as a result, the president has signaled to senior Republicans in Congress, including his close ally, Lindsey Graham, to begin move forward on a piece of legislation called the Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025. It's a piece of legislation got 84 co-sponsors in the Senate, about 151 in the House. I mean, you can't get that kind of bipartisan support for what is the time of day these days. So it's pretty powerful legislation. It would impose, 500% tariffs on anyone buying Russian energy, pretty punitive sanctions, travel bans on Russian officials. And I think the president needs that kind of leverage to convince Vladimir Putin to strike a deal with the Ukrainians, or the Iranian economies and the Russian economy, I should say, is going to be suffering some real punishment.
Is it your understanding or belief that either side has made any significant territorial gains in the last few weeks? Who has the upper hand in the fighting right now, based on your talks with people in the region?
I mean, it seems like things have really stalled militarily, but it's just terrible. As the president said, a terrible loss of life, and on both sides, Ukrainians and Russians are dying. So the president ultimately needs to convince Vladimir Putin that the best course of action for the Russians and for the Russian people is to strike some kind of deal. And there may have to be territorial concessions in eastern Ukraine as a result, but there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people have died in this war, and I think the only way Putin can move to some kind of negotiated settlement is if he understands that President Trump is serious about crippling his energy sector.
Got about a minute to go here, Mark. I want to shift gears to Venezuela. What is your view on new elections in Venezuela? Obviously, the president has elected to leave most of the Maduro regime in place for the time being, which includes the vice president there, who some say is actually worse than Maduro when it comes to running the cartel and being a brutal person. But they've left it in place, which seems to me has sort of kept Venezuela from falling into chaos at the moment. But what's your view? When can elections be held in Venezuela to flush out Maduro and allow democracy to flourish there?
Well, look, I think, elections have been held, and they were fraudulent elections. But the elections, the actual real elections, show that there's massive support for the democratic opposition in Venezuela. I think the president's smart not to precipitate complete collapse within Venezuela. I think he certainly learned the lesson of what happened in Iraq in the past. So to keep the current structure in place, but then move quickly, and with overwhelming U.S. pressure if it doesn't happen, to some kind of democratic election. And I think when we do that, you'll see a democratic opposition that really is ready to go. But you've got to keep in place the technocrats, the bureaucrats, the people that can actually run the government, while moving aside those who are true believers and who have been so responsible for turning Venezuela into such a disaster, both internally and in terms of its export of refugees, violence, and drugs.
Mark Dubowitz, thanks for coming on today. You're the CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, one of the biggest Iranian experts on the planet. We'll check in with you as this story develops. Mark Dubowitz, check him out on X and also the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. It's Scott Jennings here on Salem. By the way, it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I thought we'd close the show with a clip of Martin Luther King Jr. from his I Have a Dream speech. Cut 20.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Martin Luther King Jr., an excerpt from his I Have a Dream speech. As we close out the show today, I want to thank you all for listening. It's common sense for the American people. It's Scott Jennings. We're doing our level best to bring you the breaking news every day and the conversations and stories that are being ignored in the mainstream media. More for you tomorrow on the president's one-year anniversary of retaking office. See you then.